Hello students, today we are going to discuss the first chapter in this first year zoology, living world. So the first chapter is a small chapter, that is living world, right. So the living world means the organisms, the different kind of organism, that may be the animals or plants or etc., a microorganism etc., right. So in this chapter, living world chapter, first we are going to discuss what is life. What is life? Why we call it as a living organism? Those organisms have the life. When compared to the non-living and living, living things should have the lives. So once we get the definition of living organism, life, that should be the definition of living organism. So what is life? Life is defined as a complex organization of molecules, a complex organization of molecule which goes through chemical reaction, it lead to growth, development, responsiveness, adaptation and reproduction. So that is a definition of life. So what is life? Life is defined as complex organization of molecule. Molecule you may already learn in the chemistry, in the lower standards, right. So molecule is nothing but it's a chemical. The atom will combine together, will form a molecule. So what is a living organism? Take example as a human being. As our body is made up of a lot of chemical. That means basically a living organism is a chemical factory. Non-living also containing many chemical. So what is the difference between the living and non-living organism? Both containing the complex organization of molecule. Then what kind of difference? The difference is very simple. Those molecules, complex molecules, undergoes through the chemical reaction. It takes place the chemical reaction. Right. By the result of these kind of chemical reaction, those objects will leads to, that organism will leads to growth, development, responsiveness, adaptation and reproduction. These kind of things we can call it as a living organism. Those things have the life, so we can call it as a living organism. So hope all of you clear what is the definition of life. Life is a complex organization of molecules containing many molecules that goes through the chemical reaction, and by the result of chemical reaction it leads to the growth, development, responsiveness, adaptation and reproduction, right. What is the meaning of responsiveness? Responsiveness is nothing but it can respond to the stimuli, it can respond to the environment, that is responsiveness. Of course, adaptation, it can adapt to their habit, to habitat, etc. And reproduction means production of offsprings. The next generation they can produce. Those kind of things we can call it as those things have the life. So those things have the life, then we can call it as a living organism. Right. So hope all of you clear what is life. Then how can we differentiate living organism and non-living organism? For the differentiation purpose, we should know the characters of living organism. Once we know the characters of living organism, we can easily distinguish between the living and non-living things. Alright. So the next one, characters of living organism. Characters of living organism. Characters of living organism. So what are the things we have to discuss in the characters of living organism? We have to discuss the 5 different characters of living organism. Before moving to the types of characters, we have to discuss the 2 kind of classification of characters. Characters can be basically classified into defining character and non-defining character. Defining and non-defining character. So we should know what is defining character, what is non-defining character. Defining character means all living organisms should exhibit the character. Defining means all organism should exhibit. All organism should exhibit. All organism should exhibit the character. Once we are discussing about a defining character, those characters should have all organism. There is no exception. Simply there is no exception. Right. So what is non-defining mean? Non-defining means there will be the possibility of exception. There will be the possibility of exception. That means what? Non-defining character means maybe non-living things also show those kind of character. That is the one problem. And another thing, some living organism may also does not show the character. Right. So that's the reason we call it as a non-defining. Defining means that should applicable to all kind of living organism. There is no exception. Non-defining means there will be an exception. That means few of living organism may not show those character, or non-living things also show same type of character. So based on non-defining character, we cannot confirm those organism is living or non-living. Hope you understood. Right. So first we are going to discuss non-defining characters. Non-defining characters. In the non-defining character, the first one is growths. First one is growths. So what is growths? All of you know the direct term meaning growths. What is the definition of growths? Growth means increase in number and increase in mass is known as growths. So growth means increase in number and increase in mass. Our mass may be at the age of 2 years old, it's a difference, and while we are reaches to the 15 or 16, the mass will be the different, right? So we are growing. Increase in number means the cells are dividing and produce more and more and more number of cells, right? And of course in the case of microorganism, unicellular organism, their increasing number will be the considering as a growth. How it will be increasing the number? For example, amoeba will divide it as a 2 and will produce a 2 daughters. That means a single cell divided into 2, right? So number is increasing. That number increasing is considering as a growth in the lower organisms, right? So what is growth? Is a simple definition: increase in number and increase in mass, right? That is growth. So the next thing, the growths, is there any difference in the growth in between the plants and animals? We can check. In plants, growth is continuous. Growth is continuous growth. If the plant is existing on earth up to 100 years, continuously the plant is growing. While we are removing, while we are cutting the some part of the plant, that may be the stem part or any other part, that will grow again, right? So if the plant is around 10 years lifespan, throughout the 10 years the plant is growing continuously. The plant is growing continuously. So that's the reason we can mention the growth of plant is a continuous one. Then what about the animals? What about animals? Animals grow up to certain age. Up to certain age. Animal will grow only up to certain age. The growth of animals up to a certain age. Take us as an example. Human beings will grow up to 20, 21 or 22 years. After that, growth will not happen. If you are thinking, I want to increase my height after 22 years, not at all possible. Not at all possible. In your age, your height may also increase, maybe up to 5 years or 4 years, 5 years, maybe up to 6 years. That's all. After that, height will not increase. The reason behind the growth of animals, not only the human being, all kind of animals, only up to the certain age. After that, there is no growth. Only the replacing, somebody will ask, then sir, while we are damaging or dead some cells in the body or damage, fracture in the bone, that will be repair. That also growth. That's a type of growth. That's only the repairing the damaged cells. There is no new cell is adding, only repairing the damaged cells. Clear all of you? So difference in the growth of plants and animal. The growth of plants is continuous and growth of animals only up to the certain age. So the thing is that we discussed the growth means that may be increasing number or increasing in mass, right? So increasing in mass means what? Increasing in mass, it may be happen in the non-living things also. Non-living things, non-living things also grow. We should think in such a way. Just simple example. In a roadside there is a brick, there is a stone. So in those stone continuously the dust particles are accumulating. Continuously dust particles are accumulating in those stones. So what will happen? The mass of stone will be increase. Mass of stone will be increase. External accumulation of dust particle is the one stone. So continuously dust particle is accumulating on the stone. So finally maybe after 1 year or 2 years or after 10 years, the total mass of the stone will increase because of the accumulation of dust particle. So what we discussed, increasing the mass is considering as a growth. So what happened? So that's the reason growth cannot considering as a defining property. According to the definition, we should tell the non-living things also growing. Actually non-living things are not growing, but according to the definition, we can argue the non-living things are also growing by accumulation of dust particle, by accumulation of dust particle on any kind of object. Okay, so that means that non-living is growing, not growing, but based on the definition we can assume mass of non-living things also increasing. That's the reason growth is considering as a non-defining property. That's a very important for the NEET examination. What is that? We know the points, we know the characters, 5 different characters, but the question will ask in the different way. The question will be, why the growth is coming under non-defining character of living organism? Answer is very simple, right? The non-living things also increasing their mass by the accumulation of dust particle. That's your answer. Right? So the moving to the second point, in the non-defining property, that is nothing but reproduction. 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 So what is reproduction? Production of offsprings. Production of offsprings will considering as a reproduction, right? Produce the progeny, offsprings, that's nothing but the children. You all are the offsprings of your parents, right? So reproduction means the production of offsprings. There are two types of reproduction. I will mention here two types of reproduction. What are those two types? Sexual reproduction, and asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. There are two types of reproduction, sexual and asexual reproduction, right? Listen, next one, why we included the reproduction coming under the non-defining property? Some of you may ask, sir, reproduction is only for living organism, then why you included the reproduction in the non-defining property? The answer is very simple. We already explained the definition of non-defining. The thing is that some of living organism may not, and maybe some non-living organism also shows the same property. So growth means non-living organism, non-living things also showing the property. Reproduction, why we included in the non-defining property? Reproduction, some of the living organism may not shows the property of reproduction. So what are the example for that? Example, mules, worker bees, infertile human female, infertile human female. So what is mule? The answer is very simple. Mule means male donkey is crossed with female horse. A child is mule. Child is mule. Actually, we will discuss on the continuation of the chapter the organism with the same species, they will reproduce. Organism in different species also will reproduce. But the thing is that if the organism with the same species is reproducing, for example, human male with human female, the same species, Homo sapiens, they produce the children. Their children also have the reproduction capacity. Hope all of you clear. If the organism involving the sexual intercourse between the same species, for example, human female and human male, or male donkey with a female donkey, or male horse with a female horse, right? In such a manner, they will produce their children. Their children also have the reproduction capacity. But if the organisms in the different species, they intercourse together, sexual intercourse together, they will produce their children, but their children should not have the reproduction capacity. So mule is the child of male donkey with the female horse crossing. So mule is infertile, mule cannot produce. Clear? All of you clear? So I will ask you one question. What will happen if male horse with a female donkey? Got it? Male donkey with a female horse, they will produce a mule. Mule is infertile, because the reason behind, if the different species organism intercourse together, they will produce their children, but their children should be infertile, right? So my question is, What will happen if male horse with a female donkey, they produce a organism? What is the name of that organism? Find out. If you are not getting the answer during the discussion, I will explain. Few of the example like different species crossing, during discussion time I will explain. Okay, right. Then infertile human worker bees, also in the honey bee there is a category worker bee. Worker bee is not involving the fertilization process, reproduction process. They will not produce a children. Then infertile human female, that's all, you all know, in maybe our family some of females, they don't have the children even after the marriage of 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, they don't have the children. That means that female, maybe the problem of female, in case of female, that female cannot produce the children. There is a problem for the producing the children. That doesn't mean that female is non-living, that female is living. Mule cannot produce the children, offspring. So mule is not a non-living, mule is a living. So there is an exceptional case in the reproduction, because some of living organism does not shows the reproduction property. Example, mule, worker bees, infertile human female, etc. So hope all of you clear why the reproduction is included in the non-defining property. So growth and reproduction in the non-defining property. Okay, so the next thing we are going to discuss about the defining character. Defining character means there is no exception. All living organisms should have the same character, right? So the defining character, the first one is metabolism. Metabolism. What is metabolism? The definition of metabolism, the sum total of all chemical reaction, the sum total of all chemical reaction takes place in living organism. The sum total of all chemical reaction takes place in the living organism, that is metabolism. So the definition of metabolism is very important, that asking the board examination as well as in the entrance examination. The sum total of all chemical reaction takes place in the living organism. All chemical reaction takes place in the living organism. The definition itself we already discussed. The living organism is a chemical factory, a complex organization of molecule that's taking place a chemical reaction continuously. Those chemical reaction we call it as a metabolism. Once the chemical reaction taking place inside the body of a living organism, those kind of chemical reaction we can call it as a metabolism. You already learned in the previous classes, metabolisms are two types, anabolism and catabolism. What is anabolism? Anabolism is a synthesis process. Synthesis process. Catabolism is a destructive process or breakdown process, right? So anabolism is synthesis, is a formation process, just like we are constructing a building, that is anabolism. For example, glucose molecules are combining together and form the starch or glycogen in animals. Glucose is the smallest one, starch or glycogen is the polymeric form. Glucose is a monomer and starch is a polymer. So many glucose units are unite together, react together and form is the highest one, that is starch or glycogen. That is a synthesis. Many bigs are keeping together and constructing a building, that is a synthesis. So those kind of building a new things, those type of metabolic reactions we call it as anabolism. Catabolism is breakdown, breaking the starch or glycogen into many glucose molecules. We are not producing a new things, we are just cutting, and what is the basic unit we are just separating. That is called catabolism. So the metabolic reaction may be the synthesis process, that is called anabolism, or maybe the breakdown process, that is called catabolism. So hope all of you clear metabolic reactions. Chemical reactions also take place in the non-living things also, but the metabolism, metabolic reactions that takes place in the living things. Right. So the next one, the final one is consciousness. Consciousness. So what is consciousness? Ability to respond to their environment. Ability to respond to their environment. Ability to respond to their environment. That means what? Consciousness, ability to respond to their environment. Stimuli, ability to respond to the stimuli. Right. We know while someone is touching our body, we can understand. So touch is a stimuli that we can identify. Vision, right. So light is reflecting from the object and entering into the eye, we can see the object. So light is coming from the object is considering as a stimuli. We can hear the sound, so sound wave is considering as a stimuli. We can smell, right. So we have the ability, living organisms have the ability to sense their surrounding, that is called consciousness. But there is another term, you all know, the self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is only for human beings. The property of self-consciousness only have the human beings. That is why we are different from all other kind of animals, right. So consciousness have the all kind of organisms. Somebody of you may ask, sir, consciousness also for the plant? Of course, plant is growing towards the sunlight. The root of the plant is growing towards the water. That means water is acting as a stimuli, sunlight is acting as a stimuli, that is a response to those kind of environmental stimuli, right. So plants have the consciousness, animals also have the consciousness, microorganisms also have the consciousness, but the self-consciousness that solely have the human beings, right. So the last defining property is cellular organization. Cellular organization. So what is in the cellular organization? There is an organizing structure in the living organism. What is that? The cells are unite together and produce tissue. The tissues are unite together and form the organ, and organs are unite together and forming organ system. From the organ system, the organism is forming. This is an structure how these cellular organization, cells are grouping together, tissue is forming, and the tissues, many different kind of tissues are grouping together, organ is forming, then many organs together, organ system is forming, and many organ system together we are considering as an organism, right. So what is that? The simple example, in the human being, many cells are grouping together will form the 4 different types of tissue. We will discuss in the structural organization of animal chapter, right. So tissues, many different kind of epithelial tissue, then connective tissue, muscular tissue, nervous tissue together will form the different kind of organism, kidney, stomach, intestine, heart, lungs, spleen, pancreas, etc., liver, etc., many kind of organs, right. So some of the organs are together will form an organ system. For example, digestive system, our buccal cavity, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and the surrounding glands, everything together we can call it as a digestive system. Our body has the digestive system. Respiratory system, nose, the nasal passage, then trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, lungs, everything together we will call it as a respiratory system. And the circulatory system, heart, artery, veins, etc., 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 together, circulatory system, right. So, the many systems together, we call it as an organism, a man. Likewise, in every organism, cells are together forming the tissue, and the tissues are together forming organs, and organs are together will form organ systems together will call it as an organism. That is a cellular organism. These kind of organization arrangement only seen in the living organisms. Okay. So, that is all about the characters of living organism. We have to discuss we already discussed the 5 different characters. In the non-defining there are 2, growth and reproduction. In defining there are 3, metabolism, consciousness, cellular organization. That is all about the characters of living organism.